Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. If you've had an encounter of your own and would like to speak with me whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. Tonight's guest is Dion Orellana Vargas. Dion, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vic, for having me.
Well, thanks so much for being here. Dion, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
My name is Dion Orellana. I was born in Guatemala, Central America. Moved to the United States when I was 13. Been living here since.
That had to be quite the culture shock moving here from Guatemala.
A little bit.
I'll bet it was. Dion, your fascination with cryptids began with you focusing on Sasquatch, but later on you switched your focus to Dogmen. Why did you become more interested in them than Sasquatch?
The main reason, Vic, I was watching YouTube videos about Sasquatch, research and all that stuff. I came across, a couple of episodes of Dogman, and that's when I put two and two together and realized that it's the same cryptid that I had an encounter with, about 30-something years ago. I was blown away. Before that, I always thought it was just a remote animal from my area where I grew up. And I've been fascinated ever since, I guess.
Well, I can understand that. And I'll bet it hit you like a ton of bricks when you found out about all the info that's out there on Dogmen.
Oh, it definitely did. I'm blown away. It's just, you can say it's my new addiction, listening to all the encounters out there.
No, I can understand that. What's a Cadejo, Dion?
Basically, the Cadejo, as is known in Guatemala, seems to be exactly the same animal as the big dog here in the U.S., and just a much smaller scale. That's another thing that really got my attention, about how big they get up here in the North American. What people believe in it is that it's the demon, basically. People can shoot at it with guns and whatnot, and nothing happens to it, and then they convince that it's an evil spirit. There's a black Cadejo, and there's also a white Cadejo. People believe that the white Cadejo doesn't harm people, but the black Cadejo is basically like a demon or a devil, whatever you want to call it. But those are the beliefs down there in Central America.
I don't know what it is about the name Cadejo, but it sounds pretty creepy to me, maybe even creepier than Dogman.
It is. I really haven't gone as far as doing research of what the meaning is, but I believe it's a native name for it. That's, from the Mayans.
Well, they picked a good one for it, that's for sure. What was the area like where you grew up down there?
Well, I grew up in a small farm that my father owned, and it's pretty close to the mountains. I would say less than 5 miles away from good-sized mountains, and I guess the environment there for any type of animal is ideal. The temperature's mid-70s all year round, pretty much. Vegetation is it gets to be kind of jungle-like in some areas, but then you have a lot of open plains, very large areas where you got creeks and rivers running through it. So you got plenty of water, plenty of vegetation, and you can see a lot of wild animals as well. You get a good amount of deers and that kind of stuff, coyotes and small rodents and all that good stuff. Plenty of cattle for any animal to feed on, that's for sure.
Mid-70s year-round. Doesn't get much better than that.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, I'd say. When you've been studying about dogmen, did you ever hear about the Duayo down in Mexico?
I can't say I have. It's the first time I hear that name.
Yeah, the Duayo. They sound like they're pretty similar to Cadejo. They're supposed to be smaller than the dogmen up here in the continental U.S. I don't know exactly how much smaller they're supposed to be, but I do know they are supposed to be smaller. But that just goes to show you these things are all over. No matter where you go, it seems like you just might find one.
You just have to be at the right time at the right place, I guess, if you want to call it that.
That or the wrong time and wrong place. It's hard to say. Your dad told you about encounters he's had with Cadejo. What did he tell you about his experiences?
He had quite a few. I can recall, I will say about 10 or 12 encounters that he mentioned because he was so used to it that sometimes he didn't even bother telling my mom. With his job, he had to get up early almost every day, and he'll be driving down the road, all kinds of hours in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And a lot of times he'll come back late at night as well. So it was either in the morning heading out or at nighttime coming back home. And, that Cadejo will cross his path, but he pretty much saw it as nothing major. He was so used to it.
Well, that's something to think that he could have so many encounters that he actually got used to seeing them.
Yes, it really didn't bother him at all. He was obviously not afraid of it, that's for sure. As a matter of fact, in a couple of occasions, he actually had time to pull his gun and take a few shots at it. He was a really good shot with handguns, but apparently he never hit it, or the bullets had no effect on this animal, but one or the other.
That's a pretty common theme when it comes to dogmen, unfortunately. Did he ever tell you any of the details of these encounters he had with them?
Not really into details. Just, I saw the Cadejo last night, he'll be talking about it the next morning, if it was home the next morning, and things like that, talking over breakfast, but nothing into details. I mean, he mentioned to my mom more than us, I guess, just not to scare us, being young kids. I mean, we were afraid of it, but he wasn't.
Yeah, sounds to me like he did take it all in stride. Before you tell us about your encounter, please tell us about the area where it happened.
It happened at home. It's a place called Juan de Paz, which means John of Peace. A very remote place, probably at least 10, 20 miles away from a major city. And the landscaping, as far as I can describe it, it's, basically open fields, and that's about it.
How close was the place where you had your encounter to the jungle, La Selva?
I will have to estimate about 5 or 6 miles from the mountains, which I refer to the mountains because that's what you see. And on the other side of the mountains, actually, there's quite a bit of jungle and some big lakes and whatnot behind those mountains. So probably about 6 miles at the most.
Wow, that's pretty far then. All right, Dion, please tell us about your encounter. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Well, it was nighttime. As far as I can recall, it was close to between midnight and 2 in the morning. We were all sleeping. My dad wasn't home that night because a lot of times he had to stay out of town do his job. I had 2 younger sisters, and my mom decided that she was hearing some noises outside. All the animals were going wild. The dogs were barking. We had some chickens that were going all crazy, flying around and making all kind of noises. And then our dogs stayed quiet. We didn't even know where they went. But then my mom decided to go outside and check on the animals and decided to drag me along with her and grab her by the hand and grab a flashlight. She grabbed a handgun that my dad used to leave at the house for her. And we walked outside, a small flashlight, nothing fancy. You can imagine, almost 40 years ago. We were looking around the yard, and actually even the chickens stopped moving around, and we flashing the light all over the yard and trying to see what was making all that commotion. We walked about 40 feet from the back door of the house towards our backyard, and she kept flashing the light around. Couldn't see anything besides the animals that we had there at the farm. And, well, she decided it was time to go back inside the house. As we were walking back into the house, for whatever reason, she flashed the roof of the house, and that's when we saw these glowing eyes. We both stopped on our tracks. We were probably about 10 to 12 feet away from the back door, and the roof was probably about 10 feet off the ground as well. Then I could see the outline of this animal. It kind of looked like a full-grown Rottweiler. It was very dark, but with the flashlight, when she spotted it with the flashlight, she froze. I mean, she forgot she had her gun with her, and she grabbed my hand like a vice grip, and we just stood there for a few seconds. She didn't say a word. All I can remember is just her dragging me inside the house as fast as she could. And that was it. The animal was standing on all fours. Didn't move or didn't do any gestures. I didn't see any teeth. It was just a big head. I could compare it to a Rottweiler, and amber-colored glowing eyes. After we got in the house, I mean, all I can remember is my mom blocking all doors, windows, and moving furniture up against the doors. And after that, she told me to start praying, and I had no idea what it was. I had heard about it, but I guess you can say I was half asleep because I was sleeping when she dragged me out of the house, out of bed. After that, we never talked about it for years. I could say probably 15, 20 years after it happened, I started asking questions. After that encounter, now that I recall, the next day she did mention it to me that I'm going to talk to your dad about it because this is getting out of hand and whatnot, because we had heard noises on the roof of the house prior to that night. And that night also, after we went back inside the house, we can hear, the animal walking around the roof of the house. I was scared for a few days. I wasn't really scared at the moment when it happened, but after it happened, I was afraid to go out at night. I used to go over to my grandparents' house all the time and, stay with them late at night. Well, that kind of stopped for a while, and I used to get my bike home around 6 o'clock in the afternoon before dark. But that was pretty much my encounter.
Yeah, I don't blame you for doing a change up when you found out the hard way that you had a Cadejo running around the area. That's not good. You described the Cadejo you saw as looking like a Rottweiler. What did its ears look like?
He looked very pointy. The way he was standing he was standing on all fours, but he had his head turned toward us, but his body was facing to our left. The ears looked almost like pointy, but to be honest with you, I was so hypnotized by the eyes. Once I saw the outline and then I could tell what it was. After that, all I can remember is staring at the glowing eyes and really didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the body after that. All I could see is it was just bulky and definitely like the size of a full-grown Rottweiler.
Wow, that had to be quite the sight to see. What were the lighting conditions like that night?
It was definitely not a full moon. It was dark. Not really, really dark, but it wasn't a full moon for sure because we didn't see the animal until my mom put the flashlight up on the roof and spotted it.
When you say that you saw it up there on the roof, I've got to wonder, were there any trees close to your house that could have used to get up there?
I wonder the same thing. There were a few small trees, but I got to say the trees were about 8 to 10 feet away from the edge of the house. So for an animal to actually use a tree to climb up there, it will have to jump about 8, 10 feet up in the air from the tree to the roof of the house.
Well, when you consider that they get up onto roofs where there aren't any trees even close by, I don't think it would have to use a tree to do that, but maybe it still did since you had them so close.
It could have, yes.
Yeah, it's possible. How'd your mom respond after seeing it?
Well, what I can recall is bedtime became about an hour earlier than usual, and the doors were very secure after that for a while. When she told my dad about it, he wasn't really concerned about it for whatever reason. I guess, like I explained before, he was used to coming across it, and he didn't think much of it. He just told my mom, well, just keep the gun handy and, don't let her in the house. But he wasn't really very worried about it. But my mom was afraid, I could say, for a few weeks at least.
Well, I can understand that. And I second the part about don't let it in the house.
Yes, right.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. You told me in the pre-interview that your mom was religious before you two saw the Cadejo that night. Did she become even more religious after seeing it?
Yes, for sure. As I explained before, the local beliefs are that it's a demon, the devil. It's an evil animal, I guess. That's the way they see it. So, yeah, she was forcing us to pray more than usual. Luckily, it never happened again. And after a few years, maybe a couple of years after that, we moved to another town. I was going to middle school, and the town where I grew up, it only had elementary school. So we moved away from there for probably about 40 miles away from there. We still have our land over there. We still own the farm, but we moved probably a couple of years after the encounter. And after that, we moved here.
I wonder how much of that move to the United States had to do with seeing that Cadejo.
I couldn't say. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But now that I came to find out, I'm actually closer to the big boys over here, the big Dogman. So I don't know if the Cadejo was probably much better to deal with than the ones around here.
Yeah, I'd say it probably was. Pick your poison.
Yeah, that's right.
Could you tell what color it was?
It was definitely black. I didn't see any light colors on it at all. It was very dark black color hair. And the reason why I keep saying Rottweiler, because the fur on it was as thick as a Rottweiler, and, it had a lot of hair in it, and it was all blacked out.
I see. You said you two were standing there for about 3 seconds looking at it, but when you were doing that, did it ever show any emotion?
No, it didn't. It just stood there perfectly still and didn't make a move, just looking down at us, and I guess I could say it was a good thing. But yeah, I don't recall any movement at all.
Well, that's good. Yeah, if it would have done something to intimidate you, it would have just made it that much worse.
That's right, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a good thing. From what I understand, your mom was carrying you when you were just about a year old when she had another Cadejo encounter. What can you tell us about that experience?
Yes, I guess you can call that my very first encounter. The way she explained it was, I was less than a year old, and they were walking back home from my grandparents' house, which was about 300 to 400 yards away from our house. And in the dark, that Cadejo came across their path, and I guess at that point my dad felt the need of reacting in a defensive way and took out his gun and took a couple of shots at it. My mom was very scared, obviously, because she said that he saw this thing jump the barbed wire fence like if it was nothing. It just so fast and such a high jump, probably 7-8 feet off the ground, like if it was nothing. But obviously, I don't recall that encounter. I was just a few months old.
I'm so glad your dad was there when that happened.
Well, that's what my mom said, because she said if it would have happened by herself, she wouldn't know what would have happened, because he came across the road, and mind you, this is a dirt road that ran through our property. He went across their path, and it stood on the other side of the road there, and that's when my dad took out his gun and took a few shots at it. And after that, it kept running, and it jumped the fence like nothing, a barbed wire fence. He didn't even touch it.
Wow, that's pretty bad. Did people ever report seeing it during daylight hours, or did encounters only happen at night?
As far as I know, it only happens at nighttime, so it has to be a nocturnal animal for sure.
That's different than encounters that are reported here in the United States and a lot of other places too. Most encounters here seem to happen during daylight hours, but most people only go into the woods during daylight hours, so maybe that's got something to do with it. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I heard about them too. It was shocking to me as well when I heard about those encounters during the daytime. So that makes it even worse. That probably tells you that they're active all kind of hours of the day and night. So it makes it even more dangerous.
Oh, I'd say so. Did locals ever go out hunting for them back then?
Not that I can recall. I can't say they don't. As far as from the stories that my dad used to tell me from his own and people that he knew, no, actually people try to stay away from it, because they also have another belief that if you chase it and the animal feels corner, that's when it stands up on its hind legs, and that's when people get really freaked out. They claim that some people go crazy for a while, like go nuts for a few months, and it takes like therapy, or finally, just letting time go by, they get better. But like they lose knowledge of who they are, what their names are, and all that stuff. Those are the only things that I can recall from the few that actually has taken a chance of chasing it down into the woods.
It takes some serious sand to go into the woods or the jungle looking for one of these things. I'm surprised people actually do that, but you know how that goes. I guess you'll find people that'll do anything.
Right. Well, if you're naive of what you're chasing, then you could do some crazy stuff, not knowing the kind of dangers you're going to encounter.
Do you know if locals are still seeing Cadejo down there now?
That's a good question, Vic. Pretty much everybody that I knew from my childhood have moved out of that town. I have very little contact with just a few of them that I have found through Facebook and whatnot. But, that's a good question. That's a good question, and I can't answer that because I don't have relatives or friends there no more. But I'm sure they have, because, matter of fact, let me rephrase that. My dad I actually used to stay here, work for a couple of years, and then go back and visit his parents while they were still alive. And I remember this, that he used to stay at our old house. And he told me once that he did have another encounter with it, going back from his mom's house to our old house. And this must have been 20 years ago, maybe.
Wow, he has had a lot of encounters with it.
Yes, for sure.
Or I should say with them. You're married now. Have you told your wife about your encounter?
Yes, I have. She's not too happy about my addiction because, I use the Dogman stories as alibis. That's what I listen to go to sleep. I'm intrigued by it. But she thinks it's funny. She doesn't really believe in it. And I was asking her, about her dad, because her dad also was from that area. And she can't recall if her dad had any encounters or not, but she doesn't believe in it. And I keep telling her, well, luckily you that don't know they're out there. But she thinks it's funny.
Well, hopefully she's never going to find out how wrong she is about that.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah, I hope she doesn't. You take your 14-year-old son hunting with you. How concerned are you that you'll have another encounter when you're out there with him?
Well, let me tell you, I am concerned for whatever reason, and I don't know how to explain this, but when I'm at home and I'm listening to the encounters and people are there with their kids and they come across the Dogman and they can be very aggressive, I do get concerned. For whatever reason, when I'm in the woods, I don't know if because the amount of firepower that I bring with me makes me more confident, but I'm very cautious though. I'm always on the lookout, and this is what I teach my kid. I hope we never have an encounter, unless it's a brief one where we're not in danger at any point. But when I'm with him, I definitely take precaution, how deep into the woods we go and where we sleep when we're camping and all that stuff. There's one occasion, I live in Georgia and I go up in the mountains of Georgia, and I know there's been a couple of encounters in that area as well. This past year, we went about 17 miles into the mountains there, all through dirt roads, and there's no houses around anywhere near. It was about 5 in the afternoon, and we got done. We're walking back to our camping site, and I had this eerie feeling. It was like a sixth sense that was telling me, don't stay there. And I told my son, I said, are you okay to hike back to the car so we can sleep in the car? He's very easygoing. He said, yeah, sure. So we grabbed our stuff and hike about 4 miles back to the car. It was just ironic. The minute we got done and we got in our vehicle and got in our sleeping bags, when I turned around and looked out the window, it was pitch black and no sunlight whatsoever. So in other words, we made it just in time before it got dark. But when we were walking back to the car, I just had this eerie feeling like we were being watched. And, obviously I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything, I didn't smell anything, but it was just the feeling. And because I was with my son and I was concerned about it, because you never know.
Listen to your instincts. They normally will serve you well. I'm glad you did.
That's right, yeah.
You've been driving over the road since the year 2000. Have you ever seen anything strange while driving all those miles?
I have. This happened between midnight and 3 in the morning, most likely around between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. I had just taken off for my break, my 10-hour break. This is going back in 2003. I was traveling all the way to California. I used to live in the Northeast back then, and I was traveling through I-40 between Oklahoma, just about to hit the Texas state line. There was no vehicles around me at that time. Even going the opposite direction, I didn't see any headlights. Again, this was on I-40. I had my high beams on, and at the distance, I could see this animal walking along the shoulder, going the same direction I was heading. I was heading west on I-40. And I couldn't tell what it was. I was doing about 65, 67 miles an hour, slowed down a little bit. And when it was about 50, 60 feet away, I clearly saw this animal, and I couldn't tell what it was, but it actually turned going towards the woods, and it turned to its right. At that point, my headlights were about 20 feet away from me, and I clearly saw what it looked like, a panther. Basically, a black mountain lion. That's what I saw. Big, long, curly tail. And it walked like nothing was happening. I was in the right lane at that time, and that animal was on the shoulder. So when I passed him, I had to be maybe 6, 7 feet away from it when I passed it, and he didn't even flinch. It was just started walking towards the woods like nothing was happening. For a few seconds, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. But I know for a fact I was well rested. I just come off my break. I had taken a shower, had a meal. I was wide awake. I think I had like a 32-ounce coffee. I was set to go, and I know what I saw was what I saw, and it was definitely a Black Panther.
Well, I don't know what's stranger, the fact that you saw a Black Panther there, or the fact that it had that business as usual disposition when you went driving past it so close.
That's what threw me off the most. I mean, I almost stopped. I always carry a good spotlight on my truck. You know, this thing would have lined up the whole neighborhood, but something told me, no, it wasn't a good idea. I'm like, I just kept thinking about it for a while. I mean, for the whole trip almost. And after that, when I got back home about a week later, I started doing some research on it, and then I came across some videos that they have, some encounters that happened in West Virginia, if I recall correctly, somewhere in the Midwest. I can't recall what state in the Midwest, but there are people that claim they've seen him. I saw one that the guy had it on video. Using logic, I think what it is just a black mountain lion, you know, like the panthers in the jungles. They're basically jaguars, and they claim that 1 in 1,000 or whatever are born that way. So it's not impossible that they exist.
You found out the hard way that dogmen live in Guatemala when you had your encounter, but do you know of any other cryptids that are supposed to live there?
Matter of fact, I do. There's another cryptid that it's called sisimite, and that's basically your version of Bigfoot in Central America.
Your dad's best friend, in fact, had a run-in with a sisimite about 40 years ago. Please tell us about his experience.
Yes. One of my dad's best friends, I went to school with his sons, and no one that you can tell will tell you a lie for no reason. This gentleman was hunting in the mountains, and when I refer to mountains, the mountains are about 6 miles away from where I grew up. He was with a couple of his friends. Anyway, they got done for that day. They set their camping site, which back in those days you used to camp the old-fashioned. Just find a good pillow and get your blanket and go to sleep, you know, nothing fancy. The way my father used to tell me the story about him was that in the middle of the night, the two friends that were with him woke up to him screaming. And the way they described it, the screams were like he was in pain. But the funny thing about it was that they heard him screaming and it was fading away quickly. So they got up, grabbed their rifles, and, you know, obviously he was gone from the campsite, and they started following the sound of his screams and whatnot. And basically they found him a few hundred yards away, and he was just out of it, shocked. When he finally told what happened, he told he was laying down sleeping, and some animal picked him up, grabbed him with one arm, and carried him like he was a little baby on the hip, on the side, with one arm, and he was fighting for his life, you know, trying to get loose from this animal. And all he can describe was that it was very hairy, smelled really, really bad, and it was so strong that he was putting all his strength and might, and this animal didn't budge. I think the animal finally dropped him once because his friends were on his trail chasing him, and I believe they threw a couple of shots up in the air with their rifles and whatnot, thinking maybe he was running away from an animal, not knowing that he was being carried by this thing. So that was, I guess, as close as you can get as an encounter with the sisimite, which is basically Bigfoot.
Thank goodness they got him back.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think that would have ended all that well for him if they hadn't. Is there a big population of deer down there that cryptids like Cadejo or sisimite could eat?
Well, it used to be, yes. You know, people used to go deer hunting all the time, and every time they came back with a deer. So I did a little bit of night hunting myself when I was there, you know, maybe when I was 10, 11 years old with my dad and one of his friends. But we got as far as, you know, hunting rabbits, and that was it, you know, at nighttime. So down there, you can hunt pretty much 24/7. But yes, there's definitely a good population of deer where animals can definitely feed on.
Well, it sure sounds like the ideal environment for cryptids like Cadejo and sisimite to live. Perfect temperatures and plenty of water and food. It really doesn't get any better for them. Well, Dion, it's about time for us to get out of here. Before we do, though, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Yes, I'm glad I found your channel, Vic. It's something that I feel like I got something off my shoulder for sure, sharing our stories here and knowing that there's a lot more people out there that have the same encounters, probably worse than the one I had for sure. Man, all I can tell people, be safe. We didn't go out there looking for it. I'm very intrigued by it, but I don't think I'll go that far as looking for it, because you never know what you can get. The other thing I like to tell people is, if you bring a firearm to the woods, a handgun, for example, a lot of people have the conception that hollow points are the best thing to carry, and it's not. If you're going to defend yourself against an animal, you need ammunition that has penetration, which Full Metal Jackets as well recommend everybody to carry if they decide to go to the woods and wonder where these animals could be.
Well said. Well, thanks again so much for sharing those stories with us, Dion. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Vic. I love your show, and you do a great job.
Thanks again so much, and have a great night.
Do the same.
Thanks. Bye.